Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome into another YouTube live show. I am John Kurtz on the eve of the Sweet 16. We've got four Big 12 teams in action. That ties a Big 12 record. And I do want to open up the show talking a little bit about them before I dive into a more big picture college basketball story that is the subject of the latest Ross Dellenger article, which goes very in depth and I think is pretty fascinating about a problem that should have been predictable, that people could see coming for basketball programs, particularly very good basketball programs, basketball schools, what you would think of as basketball schools. Got a little bit of that going on in the Big 12, right? Could be some major problems on the horizon in the revenue sharing era for them. West Virginia has hired a new basketball coach. It is Ross Hodge from North Texas. I've got some thoughts on that and what went down with the West Virginia coaching search after talking earlier this week with my guy Mountaineer Paul about that, which you can check out on his channel. So I appreciate him having me on. And do we have the return of Bedlam? About that, kicking up in the news cycle. Maybe the return of Bedlam, ladies and gentlemen. We shall see. So that's kind of a brief outline of what I've got coming up on the show here tonight. Appreciate you all working with me earlier this week with no live show on Sunday because of what was going on with the NCAA tournament, right? We had Iowa State and Arizona going back to back. I didn't want to pull everybody away from that. So just trickled out some videos for you. And man, on that front, I tell you what, did I get some hate from the SEC? In fact, I'm going to go ahead and kick off with Clint's comment, who Clint left this a few days ago. It was before what would have been a Sunday show. So my apologies, Clint, that I didn't go live. I'm just now getting to this, but it's on Venmo, John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo. If you'd like to leave a question or comment there, I will kick off the next show with it. So Clint says, I cringe now when a conference deems themselves the best. It's something like entitlement when the chips are down. Brett Yormark should change the narrative. Prove it year in and year out. Let's trailblaze that narrative. All right, so the narrative, like, hey, it's up for grabs every single year, I guess is really the idea behind what you're saying there, Clint. I think it may well be up for grabs every single year. I don't expect this to be, well, especially if we're about to get, this is good tease, Clint, honestly, for that article about what could happen to Power 4 basketball in the revenue sharing era. I think we have a lot to figure out about what this is going to look like. And it very much could be a reasonable expectation to say this is going to bounce around quite a bit. And there is not going to be one league that just takes a total stranglehold on all of this, as much as the SEC would really want that to be the case. And some of the deal here with the SEC is kind of to your point, like you can never really truly live up to those expectations of being the best league ever. And I know, I took a lot of crap from SEC fans. The SEC did go 7-1 in the round of 32, but it was only 8-6 in the round of 64. So I don't know. Look, to me, it was kind of like, yeah, the bottom of the SEC did not perform all that well. And it gets into this argument of, all right, well, they were not as high of a seed, so they would not be expected to do as well. Whereas the top of the league, they had all these high seeds. At a certain point, it's almost impossible to really parse through. It's just, I don't think they should have gotten that many teams in, and probably is as simple as if you just keep Texas and Oklahoma out of the damn thing because they went 6-12 in your league, I'd feel a lot better about this instead of getting into this crazy two-sided conversation of like, one side digging in on the SEC being overrated, the other side digging in on the SEC being the greatest thing ever, because I've only heard both. And, I guess my take comes down obviously more on the overrated side, but if you actually listen to what I'm saying beyond just the headline, and I understand, look, I've got to make the headline to get you to click the video. That's the idea, right? You got to lean into it a little bit more with the headline of the video. And I try to not be too crazy with that most of the time, but that is just the reality. If you actually listen to the take, it was kind of just like, yeah, I don't know that the SEC should have gotten 14 teams in. They still were the best league in college basketball, and it was not a dreadful performance. in the tournament. But I do think we saw that the bottom of the league wasn't that great. I mean, Georgia got completely clapped by Gonzaga. It was 27-3 at one point. Texas looked pretty bad in blowing it against Xavier. Oklahoma, I guess reasonably competitive against Gonzaga, but 9 seed that loses in the first round after going 6-12 in their league. Color me not really that impressed with what the Sooners were. So anyway, just some thoughts there to piggyback off of what Clint said. But boy, yeah, that video got the comments fired up. My tweet about that I thought was, I don't know, sort of innocuous. I've had 3 full days of the entire Southeast in my Twitter mentions. So it's been a bit of a trip. I know I deserve it. Put myself out there, made that statement. It is what it is. Anyway, as far as the Big 12 goes in the NCAA tournament, this is not the SEC. This is the Big 12, all right? We're talking about this is Big 12. Give me the Dan Hawkins rant. Man, do I love what BYU is doing. And I really mean what I said. I know I got comments from Utah fans saying that I was just pandering too much to BYU with that video about like, hey, this could be the next like power in the Big 12, BYU. I just think that's objectively true. I don't know how you look at that and say anything outside of that, because there's a lot of momentum here. Back-to-back years making the tourney as a 6 seed, but now you've got a Sweet 16 to back that up with a new coach who's young, ascending from the NBA, different style, and he's stepping into a situation where there's a ton of money. Now, we'll see how that money is able to be utilized, because again, rev sharing story that I have coming up here, the basic idea is if Deloitte actually polices the extra NIL deals outside of what you can spend from your revenue sharing cap, if you're a school that plays football, you're going to be in trouble because you have to devote so much of that to football, and some of these like Big East schools can throw a lot more in at basketball. But if there's going to be a way to figure out finances, BYU will be able to get it done, because I think they've got as much money as anybody in the Big 12. So you're in as good a position financially to succeed as possible. From a resource standpoint, you got AJ DePonsta coming in next year, #1 recruit in college basketball. You got a great arena that is really tough to play in, that holds a boatload of fans. Like if you continue putting a really good product in there, that's going to become a tougher and tougher place to win in. I don't know what part of the recipe is not there for BYU to do this right now. Only thing would be, hey, Kevin Young has to prove it over the long haul for sure. But I'm just saying, we're seeing a lot of the elements there in year one, some really, really good returns on that. Problem for BYU, as much as I love their team this year, love watching them, love that offense, love how they play, love how deep they are, especially at this time of year. I think that can be a massive advantage. The real problem is you got a very tough road. I don't think that anybody else has a tougher road to the Final Four that is left. Now, we're splitting hairs there because so many favorites have won that it's like almost anybody that's in that sort of a spot like BYU is, you're going to have to go through a 2 and a 1 and like really good teams and combos and all that, whether it's Tennessee and Houston or Alabama and Duke. But I mean, to me, Alabama and Duke is a step above. Alabama's got the Final Four experience from last year. They're another super high scoring team. They've been the most high scoring team in the country the last 2 years. Nate Oates, I think, is an excellent coach. And then Duke looks like the best team in the country right now. I don't know how you could really argue that. Duke absolutely looks like the best team in the country. We just saw what they did to Baylor. Not that Baylor was a world beater in the Big 12 this year, but man, they completely demolished the Bears. So I think it's going to be really tough road to hoe to do that twice back to back for BYU. So just get one, get to the Elite Eight. I think it would be obviously it's already a successful season. That'd be an unreal successful season in year one for Kevin Young if he can get that done. And I'm very much here for that game, because you talk about like a stylistic, aesthetically pleasing game. I mean, that's what you're going to get from this. This will be two teams that want to score, two teams that are going to get up and down, and like you're going to have really good shot making, and this should be fun. This will not be one of those typical college basketball knockdown, drag out. Like what's happening here? Like this is not, if you had like Michigan State and Houston going up against each other, right? Not that kind of a matchup. Michigan State and like St. Mary's, you're not getting that sort of a matchup. It'll be the total opposite. Michigan State and Drake, Drake, another one of those really slow, methodical, grinded out kind of teams. So that should be very good theater. I don't know that we're going to see BYU in the Final Four, but saying that they're a Final Four sleeper, I think has really already basically played itself out by them getting to the Sweet 16 and looking at the way they're playing and saying like, man, yeah, these guys are playing at a super high level right now. Let's see what happens. Now, the problem, when I say I guess everybody, BYU has as tough a road as anybody, or a tougher road than anybody, is that Arizona's in the exact same road, right? They've just got to do it in reverse order. Most likely. All of this, of course, most likely if your favorites win. I mean, it would be wonderful for BYU if they're playing Arizona in the Elite Eight instead of Duke, because that would mean Arizona beat Duke. I've got a hard time seeing it, even though Arizona displayed a ton of poise and just didn't get rattled at all, down 19-4 in a round of 32 NCAA tournament game against pseudo rival that they were playing every year in the Pac-12. That was a crazy performance and just test of mettle that we saw there. And Tommy Lloyd, I thought, just set the tone on that when he was asked the question, like the in-game question, what do you do here? And he's kind of like, oh, look, we're fine. Just chill. I'm paraphrasing here, but it was like, it's early. We got a lot of time left. Just play basketball. We'll be okay. And that's exactly what happened. And they were totally, totally okay. The only way you're beating Duke, you're going to need more of that from Caleb Love, right? You're going to need the 29-9, 29-9-4 from Caleb Love again. He's got to be that, and you're still going to have to get a lot of help around him. But I mean, that performance from Caleb Love is the type of performance that can really lift a team in March. And, we've seen it happen a lot over the years. If you have a special player with a special ceiling like that, they can go a long way toward willing you pretty deep into the tournament. The question for me would be, is there still enough around him for him to even be able to do that if he is playing at that sort of high elite level in the tournament? I'm not entirely sure about that, but I'm here for it. And, with a guy like Caleb Love, like he's so much more enigmatic and up and down than some guys are that have that sort of ceiling. Like you have guys with Caleb Love-esque ceilings that have higher floors. And I think the issue with Love sometimes is that floor can get pretty low. He can be a really streaky shooter, for instance. So you've got that to deal with, but I don't know, in the postseason, in this situation, when you're taking on a Duke, I feel like you'd almost rather just have this guy roll the dice, take the chance. Maybe you get one of the virtuoso performances out of him, especially because it will be going up against a team that he certainly knows very well from his days as a North Carolina Tar Heel, and you would figure would be very motivated to play against Duke. That should help. That should really, really help. Houston does have this tricky, kind of awkward situation where they have to go play Purdue and Indianapolis. That is BS. And I get that it's harder and harder to put the tourney together now that we're condensing conferences and trying to keep, they have to coordinate so many things to put together that bracket. But that is a pretty rough scheduling quirk for Houston to have to deal with, to get like a Purdue home crowd in the Sweet 16. Now, the good news is I think Houston is a significantly better team and a significantly more battle-tested team, at least here in the tournament, right? I mean, Purdue gets to go through High Point and McNeese State. Meanwhile, Houston already, they had to hang on, but they got after Gonzaga, and that was the number 9 team in the country, according to KenPom. I think Gonzaga, a really, really underseeded team. So I will take the battle-tested nature of Houston in that matchup as it relates to Purdue, but still brutal to have to deal with that crowd there. That'll be tough for Kelvin Sampson and company. They're going to earn it. They're going to earn it if they get this trip to the Final Four. They will have absolutely earned it, getting the Gonzaga draw, and now this one with having to go play Purdue where it is that they're going to play them at. Now, call me crazy because I know, Florida's great. I understand how they finished the year. I get all of that, but I don't know. They do have a coach who's, new to this sort of stage, basically new to this kind of attention, being one of the top probably 2 national championship favorites right now, Todd Golden at Florida. Texas Tech's got to take care of Arkansas first to get there. I understand that. But I think that might be there for the taking, man. That might be there for the taking for the Red Raiders. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. Tech has proven it can beat Houston this year, a fellow 1 seed. I know a lot of people would argue that Florida is better than Houston, but that certainly gets you pretty close at worst if you've already proven that you can beat Houston. So I don't know here, man. I'm saying watch out. Got to get past Arkansas. Arkansas play. I mean, they look like a much different team than they did for much of the regular season. That is a fair point to make. Not that beating Kansas this year was anything to really write home about, but Arkansas also beat St. John's. So could argue that may not be as much to write home about as we made it out to be, that they were slightly overrated. Still, pretty nice couple of wins for an Arkansas team that did not look capable of that a month ago at all. So I'm not trying to overlook Arkansas for Texas Tech, but to me, on paper, based on all the routes that are here, all the roads that are here, that seems about as manageable as any for Texas Tech here in this second weekend. Certainly for anybody who's not one of the 1 seeds already themselves. Texas Tech's been to 4 Sweet 16s since 2018 under 3 different coaches. Did you know? That's a sign of a program, folks. Texas Tech has a program. So anyway, there's some thoughts on what the Big 12 has coming up in the Sweet 16. And then hopefully many teams in the Elite 8 cannot do another last year where nobody makes it there. So, this is, as much as it was great to celebrate what the Big 12 did in getting 4 of 7 teams onto the Sweet 16. This is where it really counts. Get somebody to the Final Four. Can't have everybody flame out in the Sweet 16. Let's see what happens there. All right. I forgot to do all my housekeeping at the beginning. Please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. Those of you who are here, make sure you get signed up for the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter as well. Link in the description to do that, or you can just go to ofbnews.com. That's ofbnews.com to get subscribed. Join 3,500 plus other Big 12 fans who are subscribers to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter. Big 12 news to your inbox twice a week for free. Cut through all the SEC and Big 10 noise. I tell you what matters, how the big stories affect the Big 12, and everything that you need to know. Appreciate everybody who does that. John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo if you're not watching live and you would like to catch up to the show that way. There's also a merch link that you can hit in the description of the video if you want some John Kurtz merch or some Open for Business merch. So lots of talk here about Big 12 basketball. Things going pretty well. Same for, I'll give it to the SEC. They've got a record 7 teams in the Sweet 16. Big 10 is having a great NCAA tournament. The Big East, maybe not so much, but are the tables about to be turned on that? Is everything about to be flipped on its head as far as that goes? Because it might. That's what this Ross Dellenger article says, the latest from the best newsbreaker in college sports right now, Ross Dellenger at Yahoo Sports. He's got a whole article, lots of stuff that we need to digest here about how Power 4 basketball schools could be in trouble. And obviously that includes the Big 12, who has a couple of schools in Kansas and Houston that right now are very much driven by basketball over football. This could be a problem. Revenue sharing era presents some new dynamics here. And the dynamics at play have to do with the Big East. It's funny. I was listening to a radio show earlier this week, and I heard the host ask the question, like, hey, it's not been the greatest tournament or year for the Big East. Like, are they kind of tapped out now in this era as we move forward? Like, will they not be as much of a factor anymore? And I hadn't even totally considered all of this with how it'll break down when you get to the revenue sharing era. So here's the crux of the issue, right? Revenue sharing era, you get $20.5 million to distribute. In order to be competitive in football, you've got to give like 75% of that. That's been kind of what seems to be like industry standard. You've got to give like 75% of that to your football program if you're going to be competitive. Football is what drives the bus on realignment. Basketball probably matters more than it used to, but football is the driver. So if you're a big football school at one of these Power 4 conferences, you've gotta funnel a bunch of the money into that. You really have no choice. But then what do you do about basketball? Most of these schools are winding up with like $2 to $4 million left for basketball. But if you're in the Big East and you don't have that football program to worry about that's going to eat up 12, 13, 14 million dollars of your revenue sharing number, well, now you can, hey, what's stopping you from giving 6 or 7 to basketball? And that is the concern. You can still give extra NIL outside of that, but it's got to be supposedly, another key part of the issue here, supposedly a fair market value deal. And if that is actually true, and if they're going to stick to that, they being the NCAA, that becomes an issue. The Big East is going to be, they're going to have Deloitte hats. They're going to have Deloitte fatheads up on the wall rooting for that to come through and be a legitimate enforcement agency with teeth that keeps those to fair market value NIL deals. Let me start reading you some from this article. Here's a quote from Duke Athletic Director Nina King to Ross Dellenger. Says, in the Big East, their basketball revenue share portion will be a lot more than what those of us who have Division I football programs can do. Dellenger says mid-major programs operating without having to invest in a power conference football team are expected to, in some cases, outspend their football-focused big brothers. Greg Sankey, commissioner of the SEC, he has admitted that this is an issue. Quote, people have raised the issue with me, and they're raising it more frequently right now. Makes sense. You're in the heat of the NCAA tournament, right? College basketball is hot. Quote, it's something we are having conversations about at every meeting. I'm confident in our school's ability to compete, but it does raise a set of questions. Now, the question with Sankey to me will be, how can this guy find a way to flex his influence on the entire college athletics world right now to make this not be a thing? Because I would imagine he will find a way to make this not be a thing. There's going to be more on that later. But as far as the breakdown here, so Dellenger points out, Power League football programs will spend as much as 13 to 16 million on football. That's to remain competitive in the cash cow of the industry. And then that would leave them with only $2 to $4 million to be directly shared with men's basketball. And look, I it may have been in this article, but I just kind of a working knowledge too. Top 25 basketball roster this year probably cost you $5 million ish, and then those at the top probably spending more like $8-9 million at the very tip top of the amount of money spent. Now, not all of those were very wise or went well. My K-State Wildcats made a lot of headlines. They're spending a lot of money to not make the tournament. So it did not go well in every case. But that's an idea of what you're needing right now to fund that caliber of a roster. And you're talking about having $2 to $4 million instead of 6 to 10, whatever it might take there. Dellenger says as many as a dozen non-Power League Division I schools, many of them in the Big East, are planning to spend at least $5 million on their men's basketball roster next year, with a smaller group hoping to reach the $6 to $7 million marks. So some in the Big East want to spend $7 million on this roster, and you may be stuck at like $3.5, $4 million if you're having to rev share with football. And you've got to rev share with football because it's not just like, hey, this is the one that makes more money and stuff right now. But for so many of these schools, this is your ticket to the lifeboat. This is you standing in line for a lifeboat on the Titanic. You can't get out of line. You got to stay there and wait for it because, you never know when the next realignment move is going to happen, when the Super League break happens, whatever that is. And you've got to be ready. And football is the way that you get ready. So you're just stuck. You really are stuck. And that's going to be a difficult thing for many basketball coaches and basketball programs to deal with. So Dellenger says, here's where we start to set up potential conflict moving forward. To keep up, Power Conference schools may need to circumvent the new revenue sharing pool cap by orchestrating third-party and booster-backed NIL deals, essentially violating what the NCAA's own attorney describes as the central part of the landmark House settlement agreement prohibiting booster pay. Yeah, so the idea here would be, instead of just going to someone with really deep pockets who can throw out a bunch of money and just hand over a bag of cash. These have to be, hey, you got to go sign some autographs. You got to do a commercial. And it's got to be fair market value. It can't be like we're just greasing you up with a bunch of extra money because you did this thing. That's the difference now. Again, all great in theory. We'll see how it works in practice. But one of the things that's very interesting about this, I actually had a chance to talk with K-State Athletics Director Gene Taylor about it. Was that earlier this week or just last week? I guess it was last week by this point. But he thinks that this may bring back something that college athletics is very, 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 very familiar with. And that, of course, is none other than cheating. Our old friend cheating. So I thought this was a really interesting way to view this. Listen to what Gene Taylor had to say. From talking to your coaches or just your perception that so if everyone could follow me here, like with revenue sharing, maybe this like evens the playing field again, turns it back toward more a traditional, like recruiting will matter if like everybody theoretically has the same ish amount you spending on their sport.
You know, you say that and I kind of laugh because coaches, yes, they feel that that's a chance, but now I feel everybody's going to go back under the table. Well, those schools that have typically gone back under the table are going to go back under the table. And that might be the case. I would say if they do and they get hammered, it's not going to, again, the plan. Everything's great on paper, right? The plan is this enforcement group is going to come after those schools, and they're going to be quick, and they're going to be swift, and they're going to be efficient, and they're going to hammer them. So if they do try to go under the table or around the cap or, you know, not report third-party NIL deals and they get caught, then it's going to be a costly move for those schools. But that's where our coaches' minds go is like, okay, great. You know, we're back all in the same, you know, equal playing field, but those that have cheated in the past are going to continue to cheat. So I guess we'll just deal with that when we, you know, get there.
I mean, how ironic is that? If we were to have done this whole thing, do all of this. Oh, why am I not? There we go. If we're going to do all of this just to come back and be right back into a position of like, you got to cheat to win. I mean, it's the most college athletics thing ever. But I think that is kind of the idea here. If schools are going to be looking at this like, man, they're really cracking down on us with this Deloitte thing. Like, this is getting hard. Then we'll just go back to bags of cash. We'll just go back to bags of cash in the locker room. Had not crossed my mind, but obviously coaches are thinking about it. I saw Gene Taylor was quoted in Ross Dellenger's article saying something very similar to, like, clearly that's going to be out there. And now that idea is planted, you know, deep into SEC minds. Who would listen? SEC, I'm just saying, who would have the most incentive to do this? Probably the league that right now has the number one basketball product out there, the league that is going to have to commit to football more than anybody else, and the league that has the history of handing out a lot of those, you know, $1,000 handshakes in its past. That seems to be the league where this would become the most rampant and something that everybody else would have to worry about and deal with. But on that front, Dellenger says those in the Big East are rooting for the clearinghouse to work. Of course they are, though they aren't necessarily optimistic. Of course they are not. Who would be optimistic, you know, with the history of the NCAA, that college athletics would be able to string together something that actually has legitimate teeth here? Big East folks expect power leagues to test the clearinghouse's fair market value system and the compensation range that Deloitte has created to determine if third-party deals are kosher. Oh, you know they're going to test that out. There is like an appeals process where you can go tweak it and come back. So it's not like you just throw it out there once and it gets totally shot down. You've got a chance to go tweak it and do it again. You can bet your you-know-what that there are going to be a lot of schools that try to do that, try and milk as much as they can out of those and call the bluff of Deloitte. How much power do you guys actually have? How much are you going to actually exert? Let's see it. There's a quote from Travis Goff here in this Ross Dellenger article. Quote, at a place where football matters, we can't justify $7 to $9 million to be shared with basketball. I mean, that's a tough reality for Bill Self to deal with, right? Like, Bill Self, like, man, I've made this school the whole brand that is Kansas athletics. Like, that's me. I'm going to have to play that much of a second fiddle to Lance Leipold in football, and nothing against Leipold, who's clearly a phenomenal coach. But like, man, you can see that causing some friction. You can see how that would cause some friction. Now, Goff makes a point here that I do think is fairly salient. He says, we do think we have some innate advantages at Kansas: coaching, culture, institutional brand, fan base, facilities. They will all move the needle. And that's where it's, basically saying like, hey, we may not have the most money, but we could probably still recruit pretty well just because people will want to come wear the Jayhawk. They want to come play in Allen Fieldhouse. Now you better get it back on track. Like Bill Self better figure it out actually on the court if you want to maintain all those advantages. But I do think that is true. You can make up for some of the lack of money just because like you're Kansas. That will still go a long way. A Big 12 AD was quoted as saying, our whole governance model is based on one sport. If you want to be a basketball only school, you're going to end up in the West Coast Conference. Sorry, WCC. And unsurprisingly, Jeff Jackson, commissioner of the Missouri Valley, said, it's kind of interesting from my seat. I don't have a whole lot of empathy for the Power Four's financial concerns. Welcome to our world. Facts. I would not have a lot of sympathy either if I were somebody from outside of a Power Four conference. Now, the last question here and kind of the final frontier on this. If this is the way it goes, let's say this all plays out the way that on paper it would right now. Big East schools are going to spend twice as much on their basketball rosters because Power Four schools are trapped with having to rev share more of their money to football, and they start having more success, the Big East does, than Power Four schools. What happens then? What happens then? Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti have so much influence over the entire college athletics landscape right now. How do they tilt the scales back toward them? What rule do they make? What do they do? Quote, what does our future state of being look like that might allow a non-FBS school to outspend in basketball? Asked one D1 conference commissioner. I don't think that future is going to exist. They, meaning the SEC and Big Ten, they have the control and they're going to stop that from happening. How exactly it would go down, I'm not entirely sure, but I very much understand that sentiment. Like Greg Sankey's not going to let the Big East stand in his way. Sankey seems to be really loving him some SEC basketball lately. He's been using his Twitter fingers about it. Who did he dunk on? Was that Danny Cannell? He dunked on Danny Cannell the other day. He's got the Twitter fingers going. He clearly is all in on SEC basketball right now. He's not going to just stand by and watch it get trampled over by the Big East. Like, they'll do something. They'll do something. But it's a fascinating topic. Wild times that we're living in, folks. Please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. Appreciate all the guys who do that immensely. You can hit me up on Venmo at John-Kurtz-4 if you're not watching live and you want to drop me a question or comment there. I'll kick off the next show with it like I did Clint earlier today. So you can still stay involved even if you are not watching live. Make sure that you subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter as well. If you're a supporter of me, that is the most meaningful thing you could do. And I appreciate everybody who does. OFBnews.com to subscribe. That's OFBnews.com to subscribe. And you can click the merch link in the description of this video as well if you'd like to pick up some John Kurtz merch. Starter 179. What's up, Starter 179? Great to see you here, my friend. Starter 179 says, looking at these March Madness viewership numbers, 9 million a game. I don't understand why basketball TV deals are less than football. Those are college football playoff numbers. Well, the problem is that you don't have regular season college basketball games getting those type of ratings. Like the NCAA tournament is the most valuable entity that college sports has because the ratings are so high for that. And like everybody is compensated as such, but that's not an individual conference's deal, right? Like every NCAA tournament game that you play in the tournament is $2 million for the conference. Talked a little bit about that earlier this week. That's where you make that money. The problem is when you get to the regular season, like just nobody really cares outside of the fan bases involved. That's sort of the unfortunate deal that we're in right now. And I mean, like I'm a part of the problem. I don't, outside of Big 12 basketball, guys, I don't really watch much college hoops at all. It takes a lot to get me really interested in a regular season college hoops game. in anything that's not the NCAA tournament. And so that would be the issue. Conferences could make a lot more money if, they were individually responsible for the TV rights in those games. But that's why, win more games, get paid more out of that pot from the NCAA tournament. It's what you got to do. It's another part of the SEC getting 14. That obviously is a massive advantage there in terms of the amount of money that you're going to make off of the tournament. So you got to find some way to make regular season college basketball more enticing to people, which I don't 100% know how exactly you would do that right now. There could not be a bigger contrast between regular season college hoops and the NCAA tournament in terms of the public's interest. Whereas, college football playoff, obviously there's huge interest there, but there's still huge interest for college football regular season games. We just, as a country, we've decided we love football that much more. So that is kind of the deal on that. But it is still, it's encouraging. It's good to see the March Madness numbers. You would still much rather those be high as opposed to low. And there was a line of thought from a lot of people that, because you have less mid-majors around in the Sweet 16 this year, those numbers are going to dip. Well, at least not right now. At least not this year. It does not seem to be dipping. So anyway. Oh, yes. All right, so West Virginia made a hire. West Virginia hires Ross Hodge, the coach at North Texas, to be its next basketball coach. West Virginia's been through the ringer, guys. Ren Baker, I think, did a solid job here in a tough situation, at least on paper. It's hard to judge a hire like this. It was not some slam dunk hire. There really wasn't a slam dunk hire available out there. Not even one, I think, really to the level of like a Darren DeVries last year was. I don't think there was somebody out there who was going to, quote unquote, I guess, like win the press release. I won't even say press conference because, I'll wait to hear what Ross Hodge says at his intro press conference. But somebody who's going to win the press release, win social media, just be a great hire in terms of that. Don't know that guy was out there, but it could be just what the doctor ordered for the Mountaineers here too. What I told Mountaineer Paul when I went on Locked On West Virginia on Sunday was like, hey, just get a ball coach, man. Just get somebody who can coach ball. You've got financial support there. You've got a good fan base. Like, the infrastructure is there to be successful. You've had a lot of recent success as a program. Like, it's, you don't have to go back years and years to find second weekends for West Virginia. Speaking of where we're at right now, just make sure you go get somebody who can really coach basketball. And it seems like, Ross Hodge, I know people are going to look around and be like, all right, Johnny's been the head coach at North Texas 2 years, never even made the tournament. But first of all, he was on Grant McCaslin's staff. He took over Grant McCaslin's North Texas program where you're losing your best players. Like Tyler Perry was the best player on Grant McCaslin's last team. He immediately up and transfers to K-State after that season. And so, you're having to rebuild basically every year there because of the portal. Goes 19-15 in year one. This year, North Texas was 27-8. They finished second in the American, and they're still going in the NIT, for whatever that is worth. Trilly Donovan, another one of these, like, for whatever value you place in him, but he's the biggest college basketball insider that's going right now. He uses Discord to relay a lot of that information, but a huge newsbreaker and as connected a guy as you will find in college basketball. He really liked him. He brought up a tweet this week that he had a couple of years ago when McCaslin left and said, like, hey, North Texas is going to be just fine. Ross Hodge is a rising star. So that's somebody in the industry who's as connected as anybody. He clearly talks to a ton of coaches, has staff connections everywhere. And he's saying that this is a guy who's really, really highly thought of. If you want a little bit of extra info on him, I mentioned he coached under McCaslin. He was there from 2017 to 2023. And Ren Baker was the AD from 16 to 22. So he overlapped quite a bit there. There's clearly an existing relationship between these two guys. And that could help when you're in a situation where if you're West Virginia, like you do really need somebody who's going to be there for a little while, which goes against, that's another thing that I've said here before, but goes against my typical knee-jerk reaction to judging and evaluating a hire. My typical reaction would be Just go get the guy who's going to do the best job. Get the guy who you think is the best coach. Don't worry about this like long-term fit thing, because you need somebody to win. And if they win and they leave in a couple of years, so be it. Your program's in a better place. It just proved that another coach could win there. You've got everything it takes to win. Do that instead of getting yourself locked into somebody who's not going to leave, but maybe pretty mediocre. That's generally my thought. But this is the exception to the rule. West Virginia is the exception to the rule, because look at what's happened. You go through the Huggins thing, a year with an interim coach. You make a great hire, and then he comes in and bails, and just pretty unceremoniously bails. Like, bails in a way that has everybody mad, fan base kind of splintered. Not the greatest of looks, right? I can understand if you're a West Virginia fan and you'd be like, yo, DeVries, like, the way you seem to handle this makes it seem like you didn't really like it here very much. That's not great for helping us with the next thing. So, like, I get why West Virginia fans are upset by that. And for all those reasons, you need some stability. You can't be doing this again next year at all costs. You cannot be doing this again next year after year one with Ross Hodge, basically looking at a fourth coach in 4 years. Somebody's got to settle down a little bit here. It's going to change the way that you operate. Now, he's saying the right things. Here's a quote from Ross Hodge. It is with great honor and humility that I accept the head men's basketball coaching position at West Virginia. I have such respect for the toughness, grit, and pride of the people of West Virginia, not the program or players. I have such respect for the toughness, grit, and pride of the people of West Virginia, and my hope is that we can reflect that with how our team competes on the court. We believe we have everything we need to be successful and to challenge for Big 12 championships, and look forward to competing against the best coaches. Calling out the fans there, I think, is a good move. It's a fan base that's hurting. They had to endure the snub from the NCAA tournament, which was, just ridiculous. I still don't understand how exactly that happened. Not even a team that most considered to be like really, truly on the bubble. Get left out. Days later, DeVries is gone, with this cloud of like, he and his family didn't like Morgantown. He was talking to Indiana way before this actually happened. Even the conspiracy theories about it all going back to the preseason tournament in November, like all that stuff. That's a fan base that needs to be spoken to. You gotta start mending some fences, doing some healing with the fans there. Get them on board. Now, from the little snippet that I saw on social media, it did seem like West Virginia Twitter was getting behind this and liked this. This is, putting myself in West Virginia fan shoes. This is a hire that I could sell myself on. I could get behind this. Grant McCasland disciple, the way that McCasland is executing right now at Texas Tech, which is tremendous. And then winning at North Texas the way that he did this year, even if it's like, okay, Grant McCasland won the NIT and then got hired away by Texas Tech. He was not in the NCAA tournament there. Won the NIT, got hired away by Texas Tech. You've seen how that works out. Young, truly, really connected guy in the industry, says he's a rising star. I can very, very much sell myself on that for sure. For sure. So some thoughts there for you, West Virginia fans. A little more backstory. The style here, this seems to, he talks about blue collar nature of the West Virginia fan base. Over the past 5 years, North Texas has the second best scoring defense in the nation, behind only Big 12 fans. Houston, number one, North Texas, number two. And they were third nationally this season, allowing fewer than 60 points per game. That does seem to be something that would fit stylistically with West Virginia, the fan base, and kind of what the people really expect there. So I wish nothing but the best for Ross Hodge and West Virginia fans. I definitely wish nothing but the best for the fan base in recovering from what was just an awful, no good, very bad week of West Virginia hoops. And I hope this is a guy that can stick around a little while and truly appreciate what's in place there in Morgantown, because I think there's a lot. I think there is a lot that's in place there. Fan support, money, recent history. I think all that stuff, shows you that you can definitely win. You can definitely win there. All right. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. Appreciate all of you guys that do. John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo if you want to leave a question or comment that way. and I will kick off the next show with it. You can click the $ below the chat box to submit a super chat. If you want to make sure that your question or comment makes it on the show tonight, you can fill up the chat otherwise, but that is the way to make sure that you get on. And subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter. That's ofbnews.com in order to do that. Get Big 12 news to your inbox for free twice a week. Cut through all the SEC and Big 10 noise. Find out what's happening in college sports and why it matters to the Big 12. Very easy to do so. ofbnews.com. Okay, is Bedlam coming back? Do we have Bedlam back in football? Switching gears to football here. I think any reasonable college sports fan would want Bedlam to come back, and it's in the headlines that there is a path to making this happen. All right. This is one of the great tragedies of conference realignment that we lost the annual Bedlam game. Insert jokes. I can hear Oklahoma fans now like, oh, is it really that? We beat them every year, whatever. Well, not the last one. Okay. First of all, but second of all, it's a great game no matter what. And it's just, it's the pure bitter hatred between two fan bases. Game that's been played forever. One of these things that historically just like it needs to happen. College sports is undeniably worse off for not having Bedlam every single year. One of the dumbest things that we do with this sport through conference realignment is break up rivalries like this. We did it to Texas A&M and Texas for a while. Now that obviously is coming back now that Texas is in the SEC, but Pitt, West Virginia, again, has come back now, but we were missing it for a while, that's a very dumb thing to not be playing that every year. Kansas, Missouri. Yes. Even football talking about that. Like, yeah, we should be having that every year. It's a ridiculous part of the sport. The conference realignment robs us of these things, that the suits, the folks making all the decisions for TV, for Fox and ESPN, they have helped rob us of these things. The greed of the university presidents, which translates into greed of Greg Sankey, greed of Tony Petitti. Even, you want to take it back to Kevin Warren in the Big Ten as well. All those guys take stuff like this away from us. But Mike Gundy thinks he has a solution to bring it back. And you know what? When there's a microphone in front of Mike Gundy and he's going to speak, I would generally advise that you listen. It's typically pretty entertaining, and you don't always know what's going to come out of his mouth. So it's a pretty good combo. Mike Gundy wants to bring Bedlam back, but only in one particular circumstance, at least as of right now. So here's what Gundy said. Quote, that's something we've talked about, Gundy said, of practicing or scrimmaging against another team in the spring. Quote, I think it's a great idea. Honestly, for us, we should do a home and home with Oklahoma in the spring. They should come here on the 19th. I think theirs is earlier in the year. We should go down there and play a home and home against each other in the spring. Charge $25 a head. He's got this all figured out. Charge $25 a head, and they can use it for NIL. We can use it for NIL. If they don't want to do two in the spring, we can do one here this year, do it there next year, and split the gate because we get tired of practicing against each other. It is so fascinating to me, first of all, how divergent the opinions are between coaches right now in spring games, because most coaches now seem to be pivoting totally away from them. I'm close to the K-State program and seeing that all the time. And Chris Kleiman was a very early adopter on getting away from spring games. That was a point of contention early on in his tenure at K-State. Lots of coaches now seem to be falling in line with that. And then you've got Coach Prime, right? You got Dion out here saying, hey, get us an opponent. Let's play somebody. Let's put it on TV. Let's do something with this. And even Mike Gundy falling in line now, who, demeanor, philosophically, you might not think there's a lot in common between Dion and Mike Gundy, but there is at least here. And he is being fearless about this and saying, let's go play OU. Dion, as I mentioned, has been trying to do this, and it sounds like he might get Syracuse too. But what would you rather watch in some sort of spring football game? Would you rather watch Oklahoma State and Oklahoma, or would you rather watch Colorado and Syracuse? Now, I'd watch them both. I think a lot of us would. If you're watching this channel, you're probably into it enough that you would watch both. but that's a good way to get like the casuals in your fan base to really care. If you're going to play some sort of spring game against Oklahoma when that game doesn't exist anymore. But there are a couple things here with this. My question would be like, is this something we should want? Is this something that would be good? Like undoubtedly good. Yeah, there is a part of me that feels like, well, I mean, I want Bedlam very badly, but this feels a little like getting a McDonald's or just a regular tiny cheeseburger when I wanted a steak. Like, yeah, I guess like technically kind of the same thing. You are getting the meat, but yeah, it's hollow compared to what I actually wanted. It's a shell of what I actually wanted. Some of it would depend too on the quality of the game, I suppose, and that's where I just feel like to Oklahoma State it would mean so much more. Like that's maybe another thing for Gundy. Like, hey, we'd probably win the damn thing more because it's going to mean more to our players than it is to guys that are at Oklahoma, especially now that they're in the SEC and we are out of sight, out of mind here. Our guys are going to be fired up to go play them. SEC team, Oklahoma, even if I'm a transfer that's not associated with the rivalry, that's an SEC team. We are not one of those. So I'm going to be up for this game. I'm going to be up for playing this. That's why, like, I think it's pretty doubtful that you would see Oklahoma actually give in and agree to doing this. Because for them, it's like, why? I mean, the only thing that can happen here is we'll lose to you and maybe lose some of our perceived, just vice grip on this rivalry, and we can just be done with it. We're in the SEC now. We don't have to do anything with that. I wouldn't think that's something that Oklahoma would really want to do. I think it would mean a lot more to Gundy and company and his players and the Oklahoma State fans and all that. And you'd be walking into a buzzsaw at Boone Pickens. I mean, it would be fascinating. I'm listening to myself say this and thinking about it in my head. Like, what does that stadium look like, for a spring game Bedlam? How does that atmosphere play out? What does the game feel like? And then if you got guys going really, really hard and they're playing against another team instead of just themselves, how much injury risk is there? How much risk are you putting your roster through in doing that? It's one thing to just be scrimmaging against yourselves. It's quite another to bring in another team that's going to up the intensity level just naturally from what it is when you're practicing each other. And then what if it's your bitter arch rival who you lost the rivalry game with because they had to go ditch you in a more profitable conference? All right, well, now you're talking about one side that's probably going to be a little more fired up, playing really hard. You're going to be risking some injury there. And it could, what? I thought of this too, like in terms of like what coaches are paranoid, I think generally, and they think about all these things, like paranoid in a good way almost. Like it helps them, it behooves them to be that. But coaches are obviously going to be thinking about injuries, and then what does this do to fan expectations? This is I will tell you a story. And this is back in the days of just scrimmaging against yourselves. But L. Roberson, who turned into a great K-State quarterback, had a really rocky start to his career. And I know Bill Snyder would tell you that worst thing that ever happened to him is he ripped off like an 80-yard touchdown run in a spring game the first time he ever touched the ball in a K-State uniform when expectations were already high for him. And people thought he was the next Michael Bishop. And then he struggled to meet those expectations, had too big of a head, screwed everything all up because of what happened in the spring game. Now take that as like you do that against Oklahoma, who might be a shell of what it turns out to be during the season because they're just getting used to a new roster and portal. And every year there could be so much fluctuation with that. One team may be way less equipped to be ready to go at that point in the year because they have so many more portal entries to work into their, there's so many variables with that. And if you go out there and look terrible or you go out there and look great, that can do one thing or the other to how your fans feel about you, and it could affect you in a negative light. So paranoid coaches, I would imagine, would be thinking about that, man. That's something I'm thinking about, at least. That's something I'm thinking about. But I mean, the bottom line for me is, I guess I did say, yeah, does it feel like it would just make me like crave the steak and be like, man, this burger's fine. I guess like I'm going to survive, but I'm craving the steak now. I want that. I want the steak. Get me to the steakhouse. Make no mistake about it. I would watch this. Yes, I would watch the hell out of this, of course. If you put it on TV, I will definitely watch it, Mike Gundy, if you can make it happen. But I have my doubts that Oklahoma is going to do it. And I just have my doubts that this type of thing would be something that would catch on anyway. But I'm all for exploring different ideas. Mike Gundy now seems to be about as creative as anybody in how to facilitate NIL after, for a while, I think the Oklahoma State fan complaint was that he was not embracing it enough. Now he's the guy trying to put QR codes on helmets and trying to go play Oklahoma in an exhibition spring game just to be able to generate some NIL money. Nick, speaking of the Cowboys, here's Nick. Nick says, to all my Big 12 West Virginia brethren, and by the way, thank you, Nick, for your generous donation. Thank you, sir. Having just witnessed North Texas play live and in person, I can say you're getting a coach that will absolutely have a team who is hard-nosed, plays outstanding D, and knows how to win. Solid hire. There you go. West Virginia fans, you got the Nick stamp of approval. After Oklahoma State just played North Texas in the NIT. Thank you, Nick. And Nick, I'd be curious what you think about this Mike Gundy idea for Bedlam. How much you would be behind that. Daniel, thank you so much for your generous donation, my friend. I appreciate you immensely. Cat fan in Huskerland, a.k.a. Daniel Osborne. What do you think the Cats' chances are against USC in the women's basketball tournament? I know they're still going to be tough without Juju. Hopefully she has a successful and speedy recovery. I'm back to work now after recovery from my knee surgery. Hey, congratulations, Daniel. Get back after it, my friend. Glad to hear that. Well, look, I will not profess to be a women's basketball expert here. And, I wish I had more time even to just watch K-State's team this year. It's just keeping up with life on top of a day job and everything I'm doing here. It's really hard to have the bandwidth for more than just college football and college men's basketball. So I'm not a great gauge of that. What I can tell you is people that I know that watch it more seem to think that, USC is still going to be really, really, really tough without that. So I hope they can dunk on me for this. I'll just say it. I would predict that they still lose. I hope I'm wrong with that. I know I saw the very early line was like USC -1.5. I was even surprised that it was that. I thought it would have been a couple more. Maybe I can check here and see if that line has gone up at all, because I saw this, it was yesterday or 2 days ago, maybe. USC still 1.5. Still 1.5. I don't, for however much you trust ESPN analytics, they've got it at like 75-25 there. So I'm ready to watch it. I'm encouraged, I guess, by their chances to win. I don't want anybody to be hurt, but I definitely think that dramatically increased the chances of a win. I would still probably lean loss, though. But we'll see. A hell of a year for Jeff Mittie and company, and that was as fun a game as you will see. I saw Talia Goodman called it the game of the year, like college basketball, women's college basketball game of the year on Saturday, that K-State Kentucky game. So good stuff, Daniel. Appreciate it. Hope you enjoy the game. Hope you continue to feel better after your surgery. Oh, thank you, my friend. Thank you. You get your tongue stuck to a pole. It's really difficult sometimes. You make it through some hardships in life, and you are stronger for it. You're stronger for it. So I appreciate you. Thank you for recognizing me from that. Got to get that subscriber count up a little bit more, based on my past work there. That would be great. Thank you, guys. Please like the video. Subscribe to the channel on your way out. Subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter. It's ofbnews.com. That's ofbnews.com. To get subscribed for that, you can check out some merch with the merch link in the description of the video. I think that's pretty much it. I am going to be out of town for most of Sunday, so I don't think I will be able to get you a Sunday live show. To be determined on that. I may just try to do what I did this past week and record you some content, some more like instant reaction type of stuff to what happens this weekend in the NCAA tournament, and trickle it out. And I'll keep you up to date on the live schedule from there. You can follow me on Twitter at JL Kurtz to try and stay a little bit more up to date on that. But appreciate all of you immensely. Thank you for your support. Thank you for being here. Everybody who is here, enjoy the NCAA tournament starting tomorrow. Pumped for that. Another great weekend of college hoops, especially this is the nice part. Hey, we didn't have a ton of upsets, so matchups look a little bit better here this weekend. Pumped for that. Take care, and I will talk to you soon.